We are conditioned from a young age to seek external approval, to accommodate others, and to prioritize being liked over being aligned. But there's a fundamental flaw in this script. When you live according to someone else's expectations, you lose connection to your own why. Self-focus isn't about becoming self-centered. It's about becoming self-aware. The people who make the deepest impact on the world are not those who seek to please everyone. They are those who understand themselves well enough to lead from within. Your why is your internal compass. When you ignore it, you drift. You say yes when you mean no. You stretch yourself thin for people who would never do the same for you. But when you begin to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why does this matter to me? You start pulling your energy inward. That energy consolidates. It becomes a force, and that force begins to shape your future rather than letting the outside world shape it for you. The misconception that self-focus is selfish stems from people who benefit when you stay distracted. If you're always busy fixing others, you're less likely to build yourself. If you're always showing up for everyone else, you never fully arrive for yourself. But when you reframe self-focus as a strategy rather than a flaw, you begin to see how empowering it truly is. It's not about isolation. It's about clarity. It's about clarity. It's about knowing what drives you, what depletes you, and what deserves your attention. People often ask, how do I stop caring what others think? But the better question is, what do I think that matters enough to act on? That shift changes everything. Because once you connect with a purpose deeper than popularity, deeper than applause, you stop performing and start living. You stop chasing approval and start pursuing meaning. And that transition, while quiet, is more powerful than any speech, any title, or any status symbol. Focusing on yourself forces you to confront truths most people avoid. It's not easy. You'll uncover insecurities, unresolved patterns, and habits that need to go. But in facing those shadows, you make room for vision. You don't become selfish. You become stable. You become stable. And stability in a world that profits off chaos is an act of rebellion. A person rooted in self-understanding becomes hard to manipulate, hard to shake, and impossible to ignore. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming aligned. When your thoughts, actions, and values begin to sync up, people feel it. You don't have to announce your growth. Your energy does that for you. Your presence starts to challenge people who are still lost in performance mode. Not because you said something loud, but because you became someone clear. And clarity is contagious. Strategic self-focus means you're playing the long game. You're not chasing the high of being like today. You're building the foundation to be respected tomorrow. You're not impulsively reacting to every opinion. You're intentionally choosing what fits your principles. What fits your principles. That's not selfish. That's sustainable. And sustainability, not short-term validation, is what ultimately creates legacy. So, when you prioritize your why, you don't lose connection to others. You elevate it. Because only when you are anchored in who you are, can you offer anything of substance to the world. Only when you have met yourself can you genuinely meet others. And only when you stop trying to be everything for everyone can you become something powerful for someone. Your energy is not an infinite resource. It has boundaries. Just like time, just like attention. Yet so many people live as if their emotional, mental, and physical capacities can stretch endlessly without consequence. They give and give to jobs that drain them, relationships that deplete them, obligations that carry no meaning, and wonder why they feel hollow by the end of the day. The truth is, every decision you make is an investment of your life force, and not every place you invest will yield a return worth the cost. There's a fundamental difference between being busy and being purposeful, 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 purpose. In those quiet moments of decision, you build character that can't be faked in public. That internal repetition creates a deep-seated reliability that others notice over time. Others begin to realize that your silence isn't passivity. It's discipline, focus, and quiet determination unfolding in real time. Letting results be your voice also protects your energy. Every moment spent explaining yourself is energy diverted from the work that could actually move you forward. Instead of trying to convince doubters or satisfy critics, you stay grounded in action. It's not about being aloof. It's about being efficient. Silence paired with progress becomes a shield that protects your time and a sword that cuts through false perception. Angel, results are especially potent because they often emerge slowly. In the beginning, you may be dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood. But if you stay consistent and grounded in your mission, something shifts. The same people who once doubted you start to watch closely. They lean in, not because you shouted louder, but because you stayed the course. Results carry a gravity that eventually pulls attention without force. There is also a sense of peace in letting your outcomes speak for you. You become less reactive, less attached to every opinion or attack. You understand that time reveals truth. And because your focus is on execution rather than explanation, you remain steady while others burn out trying to prove themselves in every conversation. You become calm, not because nothing matters, but because you know what truly does. Letting results speak requires patience, and that's where many fall short. The impulse to defend yourself is strong, especially in the face of misunderstanding or disrespect. But when you learn to delay that gratification and lean into the process, you tap into a deeper confidence. You stop trying to win the moment and start winning the long game. Your work begins to echo beyond your presence, and people remember what you built, not what you boasted. Ultimately, results are a language that everyone understands. They cut through politics, ego, and debate. They define reality without embellishment. When you commit to the work instead of the noise, you write a story that no one can erase or ignore. And that story, told in outcomes and impact, speaks louder than any defense, louder than any boast, louder than any voice. But your own growth is the best clapback because it shifts the focus from retaliation to evolution. Evolution. When someone doubts you, disrespects you, or tries to define you by your past, the most powerful response isn't to argue. It's to outgrow the version of yourself they think they know. Growth rewrites the narrative without needing to correct anyone out loud. It turns every setback into a stepping stone and every insult into fuel for refinement. Responding with growth takes emotional discipline. The instinct to defend yourself is strong, especially when you're misunderstood or underestimated. But growth requires you to prioritize becoming overproving. Becoming overproving. It's not about being passive, it's about being strategic. Instead of reacting impulsively, you commit to doing the internal work that will make external commentary irrelevant. You transform quietly while the noise continues, and then, suddenly, you're unrecognizable to the people who once thought they had you figured out. Growth is humbling because it forces you to confront your limitations. You don't grow by staying comfortable or holding on to your pride. You grow by acknowledging where you're wrong, weak, or stuck, and then choosing not to stay there. That process makes you stronger, not just in skill or status, but in character. And that strength becomes your response to those who tried to keep you small. They mocked you at level 1. Now they can't reach you at level 10. The beauty of growth as a response is that it doesn't just silence critics, it inspires observers. People notice when you evolve. They feel it in how you carry yourself, how you speak, and how you show up in the world. You no longer have to explain your transformation because your presence communicates it. The way you handle challenges, manage conflict, or navigate success becomes a quiet rebuke to those who underestimated your capacity. Sometimes growth is mistaken for detachment. You stop entertaining certain conversations, leave behind environments that once tolerated you, or disengage from toxic patterns. To others, it might seem like you've changed, but that's the point. You've elevated. And when elevation happens, certain people, habits, or mindsets can't follow. That distance is not arrogance. It's alignment. You're not leaving others behind despite them. You're moving forward because staying stuck is no longer an option. Growth also keeps you focused. When you stop wasting time on clapbacks and start investing it in becoming better, the return is exponential. You wake up with purpose, operate with clarity, and carry a sense of dignity that doesn't need external validation. You don't need to remind people of who you are. You simply become undeniable through your progress, your peace, and your presence. There's a quiet defiance in choosing growth over gossip. In a world obsessed with drama, your stability is threatening. When people expect a reaction, and you give them transformation instead, it disorients them. They have nothing left to hold on to, because the version of you they were fighting no longer exists. And in that absence, your growth becomes the loudest response of all. Not petty, not loud, but final. When you make growth your clapback, you win on every level. You gain wisdom, peace, confidence, and clarity. You build a life that speaks volumes, not with bitterness, but with substance. And the irony is, those who once doubted you may still be talking, but now they're doing it from a distance, watching a version of you they helped create. Without realizing it, boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are the architecture of self-respect. They define where you end and where others begin, providing the structure necessary to maintain your integrity in a world that constantly tries to erode it. When you set boundaries, you are not rejecting people, you are clarifying the conditions under which healthy interaction can occur. That clarity is not cruelty. It's the foundation of real sustainable relationships. Establishing boundaries begins with a recognition that your time, energy, and emotional bandwidth are finite resources. When you give these away indiscriminately, out of guilt, fear, or the desire to be liked, you violate your own values long before anyone else does. Boundaries force you to acknowledge your own limitations and make choices aligned with your priorities, not with someone else's expectations or demands. People often resist boundaries because they disrupt familiar patterns, especially ones rooted in imbalance. The moment you begin to assert yourself, some will interpret your boundaries as betrayal. That's not a reflection of your cruelty. It's a mirror to their entitlement. Boundaries don't create conflict. They expose it. They shine light on the unspoken dynamics of manipulation, dependency, and disrespect that may have been silently operating in the background for years. Healthy boundaries are not rigid walls. They're permeable membranes that let in what nourishes you and keep out what harms you. They evolve with your growth, and they adapt to context. What you tolerated at one stage of life may become unacceptable as your self-awareness deepens to... The willingness to reevaluate and reinforce your boundaries is a testament to your ongoing commitment to self-respect. Many people confuse boundaries with punishment, but they are actually the opposite. Boundaries are preemptive. Honesty, not reactive aggression. Not reactive aggression. They say, this is what I can give and what I cannot. This is what honors me and what diminishes me. When you communicate your boundaries clearly and calmly, you reduce the need for anger, resentment, or passive aggression. You make expectations visible, which makes mutual respect possible. Boundaries also serve as a filter for relationships. They reveal who is willing to honor your humanity and who sees you only as an extension of their own needs. The people who truly care for you will not only tolerate your boundaries, they'll appreciate them. They'll understand that your no isn't rejection. It's authenticity. And only in authenticity can real connection take root and flourish. Internal boundaries are just as crucial as external ones. These are the lines you draw within yourself, the disciplines that protect you from your own worst impulses. It's about not overcommitting, not self-sacrificing to the point of depletion, not abandoning your values to fit in. When you master the art of holding boundaries with yourself, holding them with others becomes an act of alignment rather than rebellion. Ultimately, boundaries are an assertion that you matter, that your needs are not inconveniences, that your space, your time, your emotions, and your well-being are worthy of protection. They are the language you speak when you've outgrown the silence of self-neglect and stepped into the authority of self-ownership. Stillness is not the absence of action. It is the mastery of it. In a world obsessed with movement, noise, and constant validation, stillness becomes a radical act of strength. It reflects a deep inner confidence that does not need to prove itself. When you are still, you are not inactive. You are grounded, anchored, and fully present in your own authority. That presence unsettles people who rely on chaos to feel important. The person who can be still under pressure is the one who cannot be easily manipulated. Stillness creates space between reaction and response. It allows for discernment, for clarity, for conscious choice. Where others are pulled by impulse or emotion, stillness stands as a form of self-discipline. It is the refusal to be dragged into drama simply because it demands your attention. It is silence, not support. Stillness is often misunderstood as weakness because it doesn't scream for recognition. But true power doesn't broadcast itself. It doesn't need to. The strongest individuals don't rush to defend their name, explain their every move, or respond to every provocation. They observe, they assess, and they act only when the moment requires it. And that kind of restraint signals a level of control that intimidates those who mistake noise for influence. When you practice stillness, you're not withdrawing from life. You're reclaiming ownership of your internal state. You're rejecting the demand to be constantly accessible, reactive, or performative. You're asserting that your peace cannot be hijacked by someone else's urgency. Stillness becomes a boundary, a buffer, a barrier between you and the chaos that thrives on your distraction. In stillness, you begin to see what others miss. You notice the patterns beneath the noise, the truth behind the words, the intentions hidden in plain sight. This perceptiveness becomes a form of intelligence that can't be taught. It can only be cultivated in quiet, intentional solitude. Skewed. The person who cultivates stillness becomes a student of nuance rather than a slave to noise. Stillness also forces others to confront themselves. When you don't respond with anxiety, argument, or appeasement, they are left alone with their discomfort. That silence becomes a mirror. It reveals what they are trying to avoid, control, or dominate. Many people fear stillness in others because it removes the usual cues they rely on to manipulate, predict, or dominate the interaction. Stillness is also a way to conserve energy. When you stop flinching at every conflict, stop explaining every decision, stop participating in every pointless debate, you regain the power that was slowly being drained by reaction. You start making moves from intention, not from pressure. Not from pressure. You step into a realm where action flows from purpose, not panic. Ultimately, stillness reflects a person who is in command of themselves, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that not everything deserves a response. It's a statement of maturity, of sovereignty, of strength so deep. It doesn't need an audience to exist. You don't need to prove, just improve. Because proving yourself is often rooted in insecurity, while improvement is grounded in purpose. The compulsion to prove stems from an external orientation, a desire to earn approval, recognition, or superiority. But that approval is fleeting, unreliable, and always shifting. When you commit instead to the quiet, consistent work of self-improvement, your worth ceases to hinge on others' opinions and begins to take shape from within. Proving yourself can trap you in a loop of comparison. You measure your value by how others perceive your achievements. You chase applause, status, and validation that can be taken away in an instant. This creates an addiction to visibility, where your confidence rises and falls with the reactions of the crowd. But if your only standard is growth, getting stronger, wiser, more disciplined than yesterday, you break free from that dependency. Improvement, on the other hand, is private. It doesn't always come with recognition. It looks like unglamorous routines, like showing up when no one notices, like failing and learning instead of performing and pleasing. It's rooted in humility, because it accepts you're not perfect. And it's grounded in courage, because it means you're willing to confront where you're still weak, unskilled, or undisciplined without hiding behind a mask of performance. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you become dangerous in the best way. Your focus shifts from ego to mastery. You stop wasting time on arguments, appearances, and hollow achievements. You invest that energy into something real. Your craft, your health, your values, your vision. And over time, the gap between who you are and who you could be begins to close. Not because you convinced others of your worth, but because you became it. Improvement is sustainable. Proving is exhausting. One requires integrity. The other demands performance. You can't fake improvement. You earn it with every uncomfortable choice you make, every habit you refine, every distraction you resist. And while proving may get you temporary applause, it never delivers the peace that comes from knowing you've actually grown into someone solid, someone capable, someone unshakable. Someone unshakable. When you live to improve, your failures stop defining you. They become fuel. You don't collapse under criticism because your self-worth isn't tied to being right. It's tied to becoming better. That makes you resilient. It makes you open to feedback, honest about your shortcomings, and driven by something far deeper than reputation, the desire to reach your potential without shortcuts or spectacle. This mindset also frees you from the need to chase approval from the wrong people. You no longer tailor your life to impress those who don't even live by the values you hold dear. Instead, you align your actions with your own standards. You create a quiet momentum that can't be interrupted by opinions, because it isn't dependent on them. You become less reactive, more intentional, and far more focused on substance over image. Ultimately, when you commit to improvement rather than proof, you start moving differently. You don't need to shout your progress. You don't need to explain your vision.